Thanks everyone for joining today and kind of being a part of our webinar. We're going to have some fun here. And the goal, like I was saying before and Gary said, is to talk about Luma, a little bit about Vigilant, but really about the Luma value proposition. Surveillance is a super interesting category in the industry, whether you're from the security side, commercial or residential, right? And really when we talk about Luma, it's all about creating really a professional smart home experience with surveillance. For a long time, surveillance hasn't been a part of the smart home. People think it is because, especially the end consumers, they think it is because they see the Rings and the Nest and all those kind of companies. They think, oh, that looks pretty easy. I can put it in myself, which, to an extent, it seems pretty easy, but it's a very enclosed and encapsulated system. And you guys know that doesn't work for you. Enclosed and encapsulated and cut off from the rest of your install doesn't work for you guys. There is value in it in some smaller scenarios, but at the end of the day, you need a expanding and flexible system for your jobs. And so that's what Luma is all about. It is the only surveillance platform that's built for the custom AV industry. Other people like to say they kind of starlight into it here and there, or that they are, at the end of the day, we build our products, we make Luma work for you, and that's very important. So I want to make sure that I kind of touch on why. A lot of people just see a higher price point and think that we just slapped our name on it and called it a day. And that's not the case. And so that's really what we want to talk about. So hopefully, as we go through, if you guys are having any audio problems, you probably haven't heard anything I said yet. But if you do have any of those issues there, you can follow my cursor here on the screen, bottom left-hand corner, test your microphone. There is no test your speakers. There is no microphone. None of you guys get to talk today, unfortunately. But the other thing is that if you guys have questions, I encourage you to use that question and answer panel you see there in the bottom of your Zoom panels. Please ask questions. There is so much content that I could go through with Luma, but we have an hour. I might stay over the hour, to answer some questions depending on how nice you guys are. But at the end of the day, please ask your questions. As Gary said, we want to make sure that this is geared towards you guys and that it really focuses on what you guys have in terms of a challenge with surveillance. Because I know they're out there. I know the challenges are there. I've heard it from countless dealers when they go to deploy X surveillance product or Y surveillance product, they have these challenges. It doesn't integrate into my control system. It doesn't really have a great install experience when I'm putting this camera up on the soffit of the house. Whatever it may be, guys, let's talk about it. I have things I want to go through, but of course, you guys have things you want to go through as well. I want to make sure that we cover those. So as Gary said, my name is Derek Webb. I am one of the technical instructors, trainers, educators here at Snap AV. Actually, this week I hit 8 years at Snap AV. So all the way back in 2012, I first started at Snap AV. We were a much different company then than we are today in terms of size. Our philosophy, the way we do things, our go-to-market strategies, they're all the same. At the end of the day, we make products that make sense for you and make your lives easier as an installer. So I started in tech support 8 years ago. I did that for about 5 years. The last 3 years now, I've been focused on doing training and education for every one of you guys. So I do instruction for everything from Oversee to Luma to Binary. I even teach our Control 4 automation programmer class. So I do it all, guys. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Real quick though, before we get rolling, we do have a ton of other training opportunities at Snap AV that you guys may not be aware of, whether it's our training portal at snapav.com, which all of you have access to if you're one of our local customers at Volume, Custom Plus, MRI, or AllNet. We have tons of training videos. Every webinar we've ever done, actually I won't say ever done because now we've done so many webinars. Just to give you an example, guys, we have done over 50 webinars since the beginning of March, since the beginning of the pandemic in the United States. We've done over 50 webinars. Those webinars are living at snapav.com. If you're a Control 4 customer, they're living there as well. Take advantage of that. Because we've done so many, if you were here in the beginning of the call, you heard me and Gary talking about it, we have some pretty specific and advanced topics. So guys, take advantage of those things. Tons of training videos, a lot of targeted support documents that are meant to solve your specific issues and challenges in the field. And then we also have Snap University, which is a great tool and resource for you guys to take self-paced training courses and become certified in things like Arachnus, or we have intro Luma courses like we're going to talk about today, our media over IP solutions. The point here is, guys, we have a lot of training content. We have a lot of ways for experienced technicians, new technicians, salespeople, admins, you name it, to learn more about our products as well as learn about the industry, and it's all free. So I just like to reiterate that. We're always going to do webinars. We're always going to do live training when we can get back to it, but we have tons of content that you guys can get access to whenever you need those things as well. So the goal today, right, is to do a little bit of defining here early on and talk about what is smart home surveillance, right? What does that mean? It's a little bit different of a term. It's not DIY, which a lot of people think, but these are some of the areas we're going to kind of touch on today, right? It's about creating a rich and unique end user experience. It has to make sense for the end user, otherwise it doesn't do its job. Easy and secure remote access. The customer needs to be able to get access to their system, and it needs to be secure, right? Security has become such an important topic in the industry the last couple of years, and I think in the last few months, it's becoming even more important as more people are at home and they're getting the feeling of what it's like to be at home more often throughout the day. That security factor has become very important, not just from a security for a security system, but data integrity and things like that. Premium home automation integration. That's probably the most important piece here that I want to spend some time on today is the automation side of our industry is really where we stand out. And it's where we can differentiate from the DIYs of the world. Your surveillance platforms should be easy to integrate and have meaningful features that make that different. So I want to talk about that and where Luma really shines there. We are the best in the industry when it comes to the home automation experience. Professional hardware, that's a simple one. We'll touch on that slightly, but the stuff you're installing, it should be good hardware. You shouldn't have to make any type of sacrifices at the install level because it's cheap hardware or whatever it may be. And then we'll touch a little bit on some the idea of advanced analytics with things like Vigilant. So the first thing here that we always start with Luma is the end user experience. It's probably outside of your home automation platforms, it's probably the most customer facing thing that you're going to install, mainly because your customers are going to be looking at it all the time, right? They're going to expect to get their notifications. They're going to expect to be able to pull up their phone, their tablets, and go and review footage, right? They're going to expect all of those things. And so it has to be a premium and powerful end user experience, right? And that starts with the UI, the user interface. It needs to be intuitive, right? And we talk about that with Luma. It needs to be consistent. What I mean by that is that the experience, no matter where you're at, should be similar. You shouldn't have to teach every interface they have. And it needs to be multi-dimensional in that you can access it from multiple locations or multiple devices. And so with Luma, we have access to our surveillance platform from iOS, from Android, to Windows, to Mac, to your TV display, whatever it may be. We have access to your system on every device you have. So on your Windows and Mac-based platforms, we have access with Internet Explorer first and foremost, but we also have a plug-in free design so you can access your platforms from Chrome, Firefox, Safari on a Mac, whatever it may be. You have browser access on every single device with Luma. If some of you guys are using Luma today and you didn't know that, make sure you update your firmware on your Luma recorders. That enables our new plug-in free experience. Same thing when we talk about iOS and Android, right? We have all the access and experience options you need there. I'll go through some of those UI options and experiences a little bit later, but to give you a kind of a quick example here, if I pull up my Chrome experience on my other monitor here, let me show you guys. You can see I have my recorder living right here in Chrome. I'm on Chrome now. I have the entire experience here on my Chrome ecosystem. I can control the system. I can review playback. I can go into my settings. The point here is we're giving you access to everything you need in your systems from every single device possible. And the experience is very similar. It's very consistent. The interface you see right here in Chrome is the same interface you're going to see in Internet Explorer. It's the same interface you're going to see from the HDMI output of our recorders. You're going to see similar controls and options on the actual app on your phones and tablets. We also have a Luma VMS, which is a Windows or Mac-based application, standalone application that you can use to manage not just a single recorder, but multiple recorders on multiple job sites as well. So we're giving you all the options you need to manage and control everything from the end user side of things. The next piece that is extremely important for Luma, and really this is something that no one else in the industry can offer. Many of you guys have probably heard of Oversee. If you haven't, I'm not going to give you a full deep dive into the Oversee platform today. Just know that Oversee is SnapAV's cloud management ecosystem. It is a tool for you as an installer to manage all of your devices on all of your job sites to give your customers the best in class support experience, right? Because you guys are your customers' tech support, we're your tech support. We want to trickle that down. So Oversee is our cloud-based platform that is embedded into all of our products, right? Our products that have Oversee have a little Oversee logo that tells you that it's embedded inside of there. So when you deploy that product, it is ready to go and communicate with the Oversee platform. That gives you as an installer easy remote management across multiple things, whether it's IP settings, it's getting a snapshot of what the camera is currently seeing, it's pushing a firmware update. That's extremely valuable to be able to push those firmware updates across your job sites. So if I go and I pull up my Oversee account here really quick, you'll get an idea what I'm talking about. In my Oversee accounts, I have at my home, my Luma NVR, my Luma IP cameras, and you'll see right now my NVR is telling me I have a firmware update. I can update that. My NVR is currently on beta firmware, so that's why it's telling me I have an update, but I can push an update that not only goes through and fixes or adds things like support for plug-in free browsers, it adds plug-and-play support for Vigilant IP cameras. It adds control system improvements to improve the control system experience. It can also add security patches, things that are very, very important. When you have thousands of IP cameras deployed across, your market, you really, really, really don't want to go and manually update every single IP camera. You are not going to have a good time if you try and go and manually update every single IP camera. Oversee allows you to do all that. You can see my example there, a little snapshot. So I can see if cameras are having issues. Configuration is limited to an extent, but the biggest thing there is you're seeing if a device is online or offline, and you can be notified when those devices go offline. All of our cloud servers and the services themselves are US based. From a security perspective, that should be peace of mind for your clients. You can assure them their data, their information is protected. And you as the owner have the ability to restrict access to these types of features as well. So Oversee is a huge, huge piece of our Luma ecosystem. It is embedded into every single Luma product that has a network connection. That is something that no one else can talk about and offer from that standpoint. It is a value add to our products. An extension of that Oversee experience is another feature we have called Luma Link. Luma Link is our solution to port forwarding. If everybody was in a training room with me right now, I would all ask you guys to raise your hand if you install surveillance on your job sites. Most of you would raise your hand because that's why you're here in this training right now. I would then ask all of you, raise your hand if you set up your surveillance platforms for remote access, port forwarding, dynamic DNS, whatever it may be. You would all raise your hand, and you would probably raise it reluctantly. Then I would ask, well, how many of you guys set up your, or how many of you would like to stop setting up port forwarding, dynamic DNS? And you would all laugh, and you would all raise your hand, because we know how much you dislike port forwarding. We know how much you dislike having to do reservations and all of the things for a dynamic DNS. We know how much you dislike that, because that's why I was hired at SnapAV 8 years ago, because it was to help installers set up their systems for remote access, get into your networks and set those things up. It still, to this day, accounts for about 20 to 25% of all tech support calls are related to Luma and setting up remote access. Still. And so we wanted to figure out a way to get around that, make that easier for you guys. And so we developed a solution called Luma Link. It's an expansion on some of the stuff you've seen out there from point-to-point communication protocols. But what it gives you is quick and secure remote access that doesn't require any network setup. It removes that piece of the ecosystem. So if I pull up, I'm going to pull up my iPad here and show you guys kind of the beauty of how this works. So give me a second here. Let me get my iPad AirPlaying over to my system. So if I have my iPad here, you guys can see my screen. I log into the Luma app for the first time, and you'll see that there's nothing here. I have no recorders. I have no IP cameras. Nothing is there in my system. If I need to add a new system right now without Luma Link, you know what? You guys don't know how this works. I have to go in. I have to type in, give it a name. I have to go in, give it an IP address. I have to tell it what the port number it uses, the login information. You know, it's a lot of stuff. So when you have a lot of systems you want to do that with, that's a challenge. If a client gets a new phone, that's a challenge. At the end of the day, it's a lot of challenging things that you guys have to work with, let alone if you get a new phone and you have to add in the 30 or 40 systems that you previously had, that's no fun. The way Luma Link works is if you're on your main menu of your Luma app, this is our dedicated Luma app, there's a Luma Link option there at the bottom of your main menu. All you have to do in this area is log in to your overseas accounts. Your overseas account gets you access to your devices. Your customer's overseas home account, which is our end user facing version of overseas, gives them access to their devices. You log in to your overseas account, and that syncs up the two platforms. And now when I go back to my device list, every overseas enabled Luma recorder, which is all of them, that is on up-to-date firmware is now accessible through my Luma app immediately. No port forwarding, no dynamic DNS, no extra setup. All of my settings are in here. All of my password information is in here. They are linked together now. I can go and I can start viewing my cameras right away. That's value for you guys when we talk about what we can give you from a cloud access standpoint and a cloud control standpoint, guys, is the ability for Luma Link to give you immediate access to your systems, quick, secure. This is giving you all of the playback functionality you need. Luma Link is available on the Luma apps on your iOS and Android devices. It's also available using our Luma VMS on Windows. It is an application-based service, but it is so important to give you guys this. Again, no port forwarding, no dynamic DNS. My favorite example of where Luma Link shines is there's probably, I would say 95% of you on this call, because there's a few of you guys that I see that aren't installers, but you may have experienced it if you're not an installer. A few of you guys, most likely, or most of you guys have had to also go to a job site because the ISP replaced or reset the modem or the modem router combo that's there. The customer said nothing happened. They say, hey, my surveillance system quit working. What did you do, right? They're going to blame it on you as the installer. You didn't do anything. You know you didn't do anything. And they say they didn't do anything. They said nothing. They have no idea why it's broken. Well, you go there and you get to the job site and you go to look at the network. You're like, hey, wait a second. That's not the modem that I installed. That's not the router that I installed. What happened? Oh, yeah, Spectrum was out here last week. Comcast was out here last week. They did a few things. Oh, you didn't think to tell me that? That's why it's not working. With Luma Link, as long as your system maintains an internet connection, Luma Link will always work. It just requires internet. So when they do come out and they make a change, you don't have to worry about your system crashing and going down because they made a change without you knowing about it. As long as you maintain that internet connection, Luma Link will continue to work on your job sites. It's a really cool feature. It's available to everyone today, free of charge. It's not something you have to pay for to enable for your clients. You can charge if you want to, but it's just such a powerful feature at the end of the day. So the next piece that's extremely important for the Luma experience is our home automation integration, right? Home automation, again, is what allows you guys to create something that's completely different than the DIY, than even the low-cost security platforms that are out there today. The industry as a whole in the surveillance ecosystem has really become a race to the bottom. Who can create the cheapest surveillance platform to get more cameras on the job site? Okay, great idea. But the problem is those platforms, when you're ready to integrate, when the client spent $45,000 on that Control4 system, that RTI system, that Crestron system, and you go to put in their cameras into that $45,000 control system and it doesn't work very well, they're not going to be happy, right? If you preach quality, if you preach the best of the best, you got to give them the best of the best, and you have to make sure your products can do that. And so with Luma, there's a few different things that we talk about here. The important thing is to first define the line in terms of where the features live. You have IP camera specific features and you have NVR specific features. Your IP camera specific features are all about getting premium video quality when you're streaming those cameras onto your touch panels, right? The client spent a lot of money on that touch panel. When they pull up a camera on that touch panel, it better not be a 320 by 240 image. It better be HD 720p 1080p, right? The touch panel costs them over $1,000. The camera better provide what it needs to. Well, I got news for you, and you guys have probably experienced it. Not all cameras can do that. They're not made to do that because they're made to do one thing: surveillance. With Luma, we have some unique things that allow you guys to integrate those in a very unique way. First and foremost, almost, and I'll talk about this more later, almost all of our IP cameras come with a third stream. Most IP cameras come with a mainstream and a substream. If I bring up my Luma system here again on my iPad, and I give you guys an example here. Your substream is going to be a lower quality stream that's available to your to a lot of control systems out there today if they don't have a third stream. This lower quality stream is usually going to be your grid view. That's how it's typically deployed in your systems. It becomes your grid view on those job sites. So if I have, for example, my system up on the screen here, my substream is going to be my grid view in this example. And then if I pull up a full screen image of that camera, that's going to flip to my mainstream. That's my highest quality stream. These streams are meant to be recorded. So in a standard IP camera, if you only have two streams, it becomes a challenge when you want to give one of these to your control system. A lot of times, to create a duplicate of your mainstream is very taxing on the processor of those cameras. And so they don't usually allow for you to duplicate the mainstream. They require that you duplicate the substream, which is lower quality. So that creates a challenge for your control systems. In all of our Luma cameras, we have a dedicated third stream. That third stream is intended to be available to just your control system, as I can't type my IP address in here. That is an HD stream that just your control system can access. That gives you unaltered HD quality footage to stream to your control system whenever you want to. So to give you an example, I hop in the settings here of my IP camera. You'll see I have a main stream, my substream 640 by 480, then I have a third stream, 1280 by 720p, H.264. I can increase my bitrate if I want to. I can increase my frame rate, whatever it may be. This stream isn't recorded. It actually can be duplicated multiple times. So I've done some testing on my own. Basically, every single time you duplicate the stream, you're adding processing power. You're adding essentially space, cache, and memory as well. So a lot of cameras can't support it, even if they had a third stream, because they don't have the processor to do it. This third stream can be duplicated in most cases up to 10 times, especially on our higher end cameras, our 710 series. So you can start to have experiences where the client can have multiple cameras on multiple touch panels being viewed at one time. You can have scenarios where if the doorbell rings in a system, you could have the cameras pop up on every touch panel at one time and show live video, whatever your control system can do. Take advantage of things like this. That's extremely valuable to talk about. So we can show you some really, really cool things when you have high quality footage being streamed into your control system. You're not going to find features like this on a lot of the cameras you're buying out there today. The other cameras have this feature, yes. They're not the ones you guys are buying. You know why? Because they cost more money. It costs more money to have a processor to allow for these types of things to operate on these cameras. So that's an example of an IP camera specific feature that we can talk about for control system integration. The next that's important is talking about the NVR and what that means from a control system standpoint. We have two different NVRs that we sell today, a 310 series and a 510 series. Our 310 series is our low cost, kind of entry level NVR meant to go into a job site where you're never going to have a control system. So the 510, that's your control system focused NVR. It's about 40% more expensive. And so it brings with it a lot of really important features. The first thing to know is that it comes with discrete commands over essentially every single piece of that NVR. And so when I say discrete commands, that means you're running the HDMI output of our NVR into a TV or into your video distribution. Our 510 series NVR has a 4K output. So when you deploy that into your 4K video distribution to your 4K TV, that's going to give you the best possible quality over our 4K IP cameras. It is the only way to view the best quality of a 4K IP camera is from a 4K NVR. You're not going to get 4K on your web browser or on your tablets or your phones. If you sell them on 4K, right, if that becomes a buzzword to help you get the sell, you should make sure that they can look at that, right? It's kind of one of those cross-selling opportunities. I got a 4K IP camera. You got to buy the 4K NVR. You got to buy the 4K Matrix. You got to buy the 4K TV, right? 4K everywhere. It's a buzzword. People love it. But the key is you need to be able to control it. And so our NVR has discrete commands over everything in that ecosystem. So if I pull up the control protocol of our Luma NVR, you can see here right away, we have every single command inside of this control protocol. Now, depending, all the control systems out there, Crestron, Control4, RTI, URC, Savant, whoever it may be, they already have drivers built, so you don't have to use this. But what I would say is if there's something that you see not working and they tell you it doesn't work, I would probably challenge them on that and use our protocol. This protocol is open. All of you guys can see this. You can use it, but it allows you to see all the commands you have access to. Discrete channel commands to go to a specific channel, discrete commands for play, pause, discrete commands for different grid views inside of the system. It's one of my favorites to be able to have that discrete command to go from a 4, 9, 16 channel grid view. Discrete commands for a lot of things around full screen on, full screen off to create really unique experiences. One of my favorite examples here is if you have your control system integrated with your surveillance platform, and it's all done through video distribution. You can create a control experience where say that you want to create something when the front doorbell is pressed. I want that to let me know something's going on. So depending on your control system, obviously I use Control4 as an example. When that front door is pressed, my doorbell is tied into my control system as a simple contact. So when that contact closes, that is telling me to ring the doorbell. I want that to create an event in Control4 when that happens. It's going to tell my video distribution system to switch all the inputs to the NVR. It's going to tell my TVs to turn on in certain rooms. It's going to tell the NVR to select the front door camera. It's going to tell that camera to go to full screen. And now I'm going to see that on all of my TVs. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to show you that someone's at your front door. That's important to be able to see. That gives you guys some really unique things you can do. And then from there, depending on your control system, we have a feature in Control4 called Snapshot, where I can take a snapshot of what I was doing previously. And so that I can say that after 45 seconds of showing that, I want it to revert back to what I was previously doing. If the room was off, turn the room off. If the room was playing something, take it back to whatever I was doing beforehand. Those are some really, really cool things you can do because we give you the options to do so. Get creative, guys. I know how creative you guys can get with your control systems. I've seen it. You just never had to really think about it with your Luma, with a surveillance integration piece. Another really great feature we have inside of the Luma NVRs is our privacy mode. The ability to disable cameras when you are home or when you are not home. instead of turning the entire system off, we used to have that request all the time. Can you guys just put a power button on the recorder so I can turn it off when I don't want to use it? No, because you're going to bump it, you're going to hit it and forget about it, and you're going to blame it on us. So no, we're not going to put a power button. We're going to give you guys unique controls. So privacy mode is a CGI command that allows you to turn off all the cameras in the system, specific cameras in the system, but you create that experience. So you can say that I have my security system tied into my control system. And so whenever the security system has been armed, that means I am away, I want it to make sure all my cameras are turned on. When the security system is disarmed, which probably means I'm home, I want it to turn off those private cameras, the interior cameras that I have inside the house. A lot of people only have cameras inside for service scenarios, right? They want to be able to watch their housekeeper, gardeners, whatever it may be, that may be inside the house, babysitters. And so maybe you give all the people that are providing a service inside your home a specific code. When they come to the house, they need to put in this code. It's not the security code, but it's a custom code. And what that code is actually doing is turning the cameras on so that when they're there, you can make sure that there's no funny business going on. This is a very, very powerful resource to have, guys. So take advantage of the control options we give you because they're there. You just got to take advantage of them. Again, a lot of your drivers out there already have these commands built in. If they don't, the API, the protocol is there. If you know how to build drivers, go for it. If you don't know how to build it, make sure that you are pressuring those control companies to do so for you. Most of the drivers, we don't build ourselves. A lot of times it's a third-party control company or the control system themselves are building those drivers. Take advantage of those features that are there. And so a few other things that I want to, I had some examples here of turning those cameras off. Yay, and a little TV as well. Sorry about, I forgot about the animations. And then one thing that I'll talk about here before I kind of talk about just some other, simple topics is we do have a solution, an extension of the Luma experience that a brand called Vigilant. We acquired Vigilant probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. And it's all about expanding upon your security integration with video analytics. So the way Vigilant works and the way that we're talking about it here is traditionally security and surveillance have been separate. Security is an alarm that is looking for things like motion sensors, door contact sensors, window brake sensors, things like that. And when one of those is penetrated, then it sets up an alarm that hopefully scares away the intruder. If you're not home, it probably won't. Police response can be limited because of a lot of false positives. So it has limitations. Traditional surveillance gives you live view, gives you peace of mind, it gives you a recording of something happened, but it doesn't prevent a crime. Vigilant is all about expanding that and with the idea of video security. Vigilant looks at the images on surveillance a little bit different. Vigilant is specific cameras, let's make that clear. The analytics in Vigilant live in the cameras, and we're looking at your motion in a slightly different way than Luma does, which allows it to be more precise. And you can have more analytic events per camera than you can on Luma, which gives it many more scenarios that can capture things. And so when you can look at the motion much more precise, you can start to position your cameras in different areas to not just capture entry points, but capture people actually approaching those entry points and start to alert people, security systems, before someone's actually there. If a burglar is already at your garage door or already at your front door, it's probably too late. You need to know when they're here or when they're here or when they're here. And so that's what the idea of Vigilant is, allowing you to expand the actual security perimeter of your home with the idea of video security. And so it's an expanded platform within Luma. It's fully compatible with Luma, but it really starts to offer many more scenarios for you to make this stuff really premier, if you will. It works great in commercial applications that need 24/7 security. It can actually work really well in the smart home to make the smart home even smarter, because you can use a lot of those virtual security detectors or those virtual sensors as automation events, right? If somebody crosses this line right here in my driveway after 10 p.m., turn on the garage light. if somebody steps in to this box at my front door after 10 p.m. and they're there for 30 seconds, they shouldn't be there. I want to do an advanced automation event. Maybe that turns on all the lights outside. Maybe that turns on my outdoor audio system and plays a shotgun sound. Maybe it plays someone screaming at them in my outdoor audio system. Whatever it may be, these virtual analytic detectors, right, can do a lot of really cool stuff to create cool automation experiences, not just security experiences. And because Vigilant's pretty advanced, we do offer some very unique services with it as well. We offer free design of your surveillance system when you are thinking about deploying Vigilant. You don't have to deploy it. We will, scold you if you use our service and then run away. Actually, no, we probably won't. We'll just say, hey, man, have a great day. But we offer free design services if you're planning to use Vigilant. We also offer a service called Virtual Technician, where we will set up the entire system for you once you get there as well, because these events are very specific. They need to be put in the right scenarios to operate at peak efficiency. So we want to help you put the cameras where they're supposed to be, and we want to make sure we fine-tune everything for you over a week or two process to make sure that everything is set up the right way. So Vigilant's a great expansion to add more options into the Luma line to give you guys just, again, premium services across the board. So there are a couple of more features I want to talk about with Luma from a IP camera standpoint that are important, especially for some of you guys that are installers. Obviously, the DIY versus professional IP camera story, it's tried and true. Most of you guys know it, right? But the DIY stuff, obviously, fees, AC power, batteries, freaking putting a little solar panel on the corner of the house somewhere to try and power your camera. Okay, cool. A cloud ecosystem that requires a login every time. I shouldn't have to really define all that for you, but just note that from a Luma standpoint, we try to give you guys as many options as possible and a very consistent and even flow throughout. So I'm gonna touch on a few specific features that are very important for our cameras. So first and foremost, Luma IP cameras, pro quality, right? PoE across the board, color matching accessories, the best warranty in the industry, options. We have every single form factor you need with consistent feature sets across the board. So I want to kind of cover a few of those. Before I get into that, we do have two new series of cameras that I want to kind of focus on today, and that's our 31 and 51 series along with our 410 series. And so some of those feature sets, and I'm going to come back to this slide here in a second as a recap, is we have started to offer a turret camera in every single series of IP camera. So when I say every single series of IP camera, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 series, right, of IP cameras. That's a lot. I don't always like having that many, but there is a reason for that. 7 series of IP cameras. We have a turret in every single series. It's important because turrets are superior for nighttime performance. A standard dome camera is not always the best for an outdoor experience. I'm sure a lot of you guys have started to learn that over time, but the way a dome camera works is these little IR buds you see here provide the IR for the camera, and this little rubber grommet you see around the dome itself is designed to keep IR from flooding into the lens. So a lot of times what happens is you mount these cameras at a really, really tight angle, and that rubber grommet is no longer making contact, and you let IR flood in. You tried to remove the rubber grommet because you didn't know what it did. That's a really bad one. Or one that you a lot of times can't avoid. You got some scratches, some dirt, some water droplets, some whatever on the lens, on the dome itself, and the IRs are reflecting off of those scratches, dirt, water droplets back into the lens. All of the above, not good. So domes are really good in protected areas where you don't have to worry about the elements causing an issue. A turret camera, the IR is separate. There's no IR that's going to reflect from inside the dome onto those imperfections that are on the dome itself. the IR is separate from all of that. So a dome camera is less, or is not a good idea outdoors, where a turret camera might make more sense. So we wanted to make sure we gave that option in every series of IP camera we have to sell. We have IP cameras and motorized varifocal lens. Our 510 series and 710 series, those are our top of the line IP cameras. Those have motorized varifocal lens. That is important for post-install zoom and focusing. That is important for, at the end of the day, if something goes wrong over time, you can try to fix it. It's a really important feature. The biggest thing that does, though, is it does add size to the camera itself. A lot of people will see our 510 and 710 series, man, that thing's too big, I don't want it. Okay, well, you know, if you don't want it, then you aren't going to get a varifocal lens. The motors required to make that zoom and focus motorized, it makes the camera bigger, and that's why that form factor changes slightly there. So that's our motorized varifocal lens and our top-end cameras. Our 510 series and 710 series are our highest resolution cameras, 710 being the highest resolution at 8 megapixels. That gives you a really, really powerful image. We heard your feedback on the lack or the size of the 710 series 8 megapixel 4K camera, and we built the 410 series. As I was kind of mentioning a little bit earlier, the 410 series is one of our newer cameras. Our newer cameras, that 410 is a fixed lens 4K camera in a much smaller form factor, to kind of give you that idea. So all of our fixed lens cameras are 2.8 millimeter lens. I saw that question come in from Chris. It's a great question there. Everything is a 2.8 millimeter lens on the fixed side, and then our motorized cameras start at 2.8, and then I think zoom, or the focal length zooms to 11 millimeters on the high end there. So nothing that's a super zoom lens, but everything starts at a 2.8 millimeter lens, I believe. We have that spec in all of our specs on the web pages themselves. I'll pull up one to, we'll verify real quick. I believe we have it all at the bottom here. So not in this one, but if you go to any of our camera pages and go to the specs, we specify, so 2.7 on our new 31 and 51 series, but our higher end cameras like our 410, for example, you're looking, we have it specified here. I'm not seeing it on this spec. There it is, fixed 2.8 on the lens there as well. So great question there from, thank you for that one. So guys, that's some important features you see there. Other features you're gonna see inside of these, we have Starlight available. Many of you have seen that already. Starlight is a way of brightening up the image when you're in lower light conditions. Essentially everything, we sell 3 series of cameras with Starlight, our 310 series, 510, and 710. For those that like that feature on their job sites. It's a great way to just sell a premium nighttime performance. And then our 510 and 710 series also have this really cool modular based design. Because the cameras are slightly bigger, right, we wanted to make sure that everything, that the install was premium, right? And so this modular install is a 3-piece design. If you're using a bullet or a dome, it's a 2-piece if you're using the turret. And what you have is a plate, if you will, a back plate that mounts to where you're mounting the camera, soffit, wall, ceiling, whatever. That plate mounts first. We have different sizes for junction boxes, different screw holes for different junction boxes. So you mount that first, and then you have a little back box that mounts to that plate. That back box can actually clip into that plate, as you see these little standoffs here. And so you don't have to hold it in place. It can clip in. You can obviously have all your wires fed through. We have rubber grommets on these back boxes so you can feed it and keep your weatherproofing inside there as well. Rubber around the outside when the camera comes in. You can then screw the back box into the plate, have a free hand the whole time. And then we have a little hook so you can hang the camera from the actual box now, if it's mounted to the ceiling, the wall, wherever it may be, and make your connections on the actual backplate or on the camera itself. So we have modular connections for whatever you need. No more dongles to deal with on these larger cameras, and you can make your connections, and then you can obviously screw in the camera to that back box that's there as well. A modular install, it makes your life much easier And just it's an easier experience with some of those larger cameras. If we're going to give you a bigger camera, we wanted to make this install much better. Our lower end cameras still have pigtails. We're working on some ways to make that a little bit easier, but they still have pigtails for where those jobs are. But we do have accessories to help you alleviate some of those larger pigtails to fit those into some back pockets and things like that. And then, like I said before, that third stream is available in almost all of our IP cameras. So earlier I mentioned our 310 and 510 series NVRs, right? 310 is your job site without a control system. 510 is your job site with a control system. Our 31 series and 51 series IP cameras that I mentioned a little bit before, those are our new low-cost entry-level IP cameras. Plastic housing, small form factor, still 2 megapixel and 4 megapixel, but they're fixed lens cameras. They're still outdoor rated. It's just a little bit of a lower cost housing. They don't have the highest standard resolution, but they're sub $100 both series, but they don't have that third stream. Still have overseas integration, so you can still manage everything from the overseas side of things, but it's not going to give you the premium integration into your home automation platform. You have a mainstream and a substream. That's your biggest differences there. A little bit lower cost in terms of the actual hardware itself. No third stream, but you still have overseas. So it's still a powerful product if you need to go into a low-cost job. So make sure that you understand that when you're looking at those cameras. 31 and 51 series, great way to get your feet wet in the Luma ecosystem while maintaining a good price point, but you're losing that third stream is the biggest thing that's there. Other than that, that's the gist of the major things that are out there, guys, when we talk about all of the options for Luma. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we go through some of the questions that are out there today. But as kind of a recap, right, if we kind of go back to that initial slide that I mentioned earlier, all the different features that are there. End user experience is premium, right? Giving a consistent experience across the board from multiple browsers, apps, cell phones, whatever it may be. Easy and secure remote access for not just troubleshooting, but also viewing with Oversee and Luma Link. The best in the industry when it comes to home automation integration, analytics and security with Vigilant, if you want to add that to the ecosystem, and professional hardware across the board there. If you guys, again, to make sure you give the most premium experience for your clients as possible. So with that being said, let me jump into a few of these questions. I see them coming in. Guys, if you have questions, this is your time to ask. I challenge you to stump me. Let's bring some questions in here if you guys got them. So the first question I see from Robert, is the plug-in free firmware update available today? And can it be updated from Oversee? Yes, the update is available today. It can be updated from Oversee. What I will say, if you are not seeing it working, you probably have one of our older NVRs. Unfortunately, this plug-in free experience did require some higher end hardware to allow it to be supported. So if you have a Luma 500 or 501 series in VR or DVR, the plug-in free experience is not supported on those. The hardware isn't powerful enough to allow us to offload some of that. So to give you an example of what I mean by that is a lot of the experience in Internet Explorer is using ActiveX. ActiveX allows us to offload a lot of that processing and power needed to support that plugin onto the computer itself. The plugin free experience relies on us to try and do that from a NVR, DVR, and browser perspective. And so some of our older NVRs and DVRs, the 500 and 501 series, don't support that. So it's just something to understand there. It's available today, that firmware update. You saw the example. I'll bring up my Oversee experience here. The firmware that gives you those features is this one right here. It's version, this is what you really care about, 19.11.27. So if you guys are ever wondering our firmware numbers here, this last little piece is the date of that firmware. So this firmware was finalized, that one was released, it was finalized on November 27th, 2019. And actually, hey, one of our sales guys is here on the call. If you guys, if Aton is one of your sales reps or any other sales rep, if you have older NVRs, please reach out to your sales rep. He informed me. to work on some upgrade pricing to make that a little bit easier on you and your customers. Thanks for that, Eitan. I appreciate that feedback. Yes, Chris Gentry asked, are they OnVIF? Yes, all of our products are OnVIF enabled or OnVIF ready. Many of you that have been in the surveillance realm understand that OnVIF isn't everything, doesn't mean everything, but it does help. So technically speaking, OnVIF IP cameras should work on Luma NVRs. Be careful. Make sure the firmware is up to date on those OnVIF IP cameras. I will say that you may not get motion recording from those OnVIF IP cameras. You'll have to record all the time, but that's the idea behind that. So OnVIF on our NVRs, our IP cameras are also OnVIF ready, so they can work on other NVRs potentially as well. But again, Luma to Luma is going to give you the best experience in terms of feature sets. So Bruce asked, how important is it to have motorized versus fixed lens cameras? So the best thing to think about there is a motorized varifocal lens is really going to allow you to zoom in on some important areas when you may not have somewhere to mount that camera up close. So if it's not really meant to be a PTZ to interact with it all the time, but maybe you have a storage shed out in the back of the yard and you really can't get a camera out there. You don't want to run a wire out there. You don't want to do a wireless camera. So you're going to mount that camera on the back of the house and you're going to zoom in to that storage shed to make sure you have that great image. But you also will probably have a fixed lens camera somewhere close to that storage shed camera on the back of the house to make sure you capture the entire backyard at one time as well. So really a motorized varifocal lens is a specific camera for specific use cases. Typically, you're mounting that camera far away and zooming in, and that gives you a lot of benefit and value. As resolutions go up, the idea of digital zoom has become much more available, and so that's really what that 410 series fixed lens camera comes into play, right? Because you can get a really wide angle, high resolution image, and if you need to, you can try and zoom in a little bit if need be across the board.
Thank you, Bruce.
Let's see if I see a question here. If a customer has Lorex IP cameras in place around the house and wants to use Luma NVR, will Luma support the Lorex cameras? So considering that Lorex is just a really cheap version of Hikvision, it might to an extent, but like it's super cheap and they don't do a lot of firmware updating on those. So can I promise support? No. Is it possible? Potentially. You'll most likely have to record all the time. There will be no event-based recording available from the Lorex cameras. They're not going to allow for it to interact with our system there. So potentially yes, but I would definitely not sell a system based on that before you can test it out. Jared, yes, we are making some changes and working on some ways to improve that experience from Oversee Home and accepting the terms and conditions. It's a great point. I hear you loud and clear. We are definitely working on some ways to make it a little bit easier on you and on your clients as well. So Lawrence asked, can we use Luma for larger projects? Let's say a total of 50 IP cameras and 20 TVI cameras. So we do not sell a NVR at a size to support that all at once. We also do not sell a software-based NVR to support that as well. So if you want to use a third-party NVR that can support that size, or a third-party system that will support based off software-based, right? Exact, think of Milestone, things like that. Luma should work in there just fine. I think actually some of those companies have walkthroughs for that as well, and those cameras will still communicate with Oversee if they're on the network. So that allows you to still do firmware updates for the IP cameras. The TVI camera is a little bit different, right? But for the IP cameras, still can communicate with Oversee. You can still technically use those IP cameras with Luma Link as well. We do have the ability with our Luma VMS to pair multiple NVRs together virtually. So technically you could go in and install 3 or 4 Luma NVRs at one time and then virtually kind of view those inside of our Luma VMS, but nothing today that kind of intelligently brings all that together or from a hardware hardware perspective available. So great question. Our largest NVR from the Luma side is a 16 channel today. We are looking to expand that though in the future. There's a great question from Chris as well. With motion record, will the NVR playback sync on a timeline with all cameras with some frames that aren't recording just be black instead of scrunching all the motion event playback? It's not synchronized at the same time on all cameras. So if you're going through and looking at playback, Chris, if I go through my playback right now and I select a single camera, right, you see me navigate, it's telling me the playback on each camera as I go through that. If I go back to a certain time on my playback here, it's going to take every camera back to that time that I selected. If there was no recording in that time frame, like this camera right here isn't set to record, it's not going to start playing that. If the motion event ends and there's more recording there, it'll keep playing. So when I select a time from a grid view perspective, it's going to take every camera back to that time frame. And if there's a recording there, it'll play it. If there's not, it will not. And as the timeline goes on, if there was no recording, but then a recording starts, the cameras will pop in and out based off of that. So when you're reviewing footage, it'll know where you're at. Obviously, if you're full screen, it's only moving the playback for that camera. So if I were to go back to live view, only that camera is at that time frame. Everything else is where I had it set before. So hopefully that helped explain your answer there from a playback perspective. We also allow you to record all the time on our system while still giving you motion tagging on that camera as well. So this camera here is set to record 24/7, but it's still tagging my motion events to help with playback to make it a little bit easier when you're going through things. Can you run your cameras through multiple switches before going to the NVR? So we have two ways to get our cameras on our NVR. You can use the NVR's internal PoE switch to use your cameras, or you can have them on an external PoE switch. Should you run your cameras through multiple PoE switches and then to the NVR? I wouldn't recommend it. With that being said, I assume you want to do that because of distance. Our NVRs actually support a feature called Advanced PoE. Our NVRs can support camera lengths at 300 meters, 750 feet away from the NVR using our Advanced PoE feature. It's a really important feature there to allow you guys to go through and just get cameras further distances away when need be. But if you are trying to use the internal switch, we do recommend a home run. Adding switches in between the internal switch of the Luma and VR presents some challenges at the end of the day. So I don't always recommend using that as an option. And then one more thing that was mentioned as well for you guys around playback is we also have the ability to hone in on your playback with custom review settings. So if I'm on a full camera view setting here, I have the ability to use line crossing or intrusion detection to draw custom lines on my playback to give you guys the ability to essentially hone in your playback, to filter what's going on within your playback. I think my other plugin in my browser didn't like what I was doing there. So I can go in and I can draw a line on my playback here and use that to actually filter what I'm looking for inside of my system here. So let me grab a camera that has this feature turned on and show you what I mean by that. So if I have this camera here, and as I am trying to give you a demo, I know what's going on. I'm running beta firmware, so that's why this feature isn't working currently. Is this beta firmware looks like we have turned this feature off. So I'm not going to demo it for you right now because this beta firmware doesn't like that I'm trying to demo it for you right now. But the way this feature works is that I could draw a line across my driveway. Even though that line isn't set to record, I'm recording all the time. I could draw that line across my driveway and it would filter all recording events based off of what has crossed that line in that example. So it's a great way to filter what you guys are trying to find and access inside of your system. That feature is only available on the Internet Explorer experience. It's not available in the Chrome experience as a word of advice there for you guys that are trying to do that for your clients. But those are right there in the bottom of your playback settings. I apologize that mine's not ready to show you. That's my beta firmware and beta plugin that aren't allowing that to work right now within my system. Let's see what else. Some other questions that. Will Luma NVR support IC real-time cameras? They will support IC real-time cameras. Are you going to get the best experience with IC real-time? No. But if you want to go upgrade a job site to get that NVR, definitely. It will support that for you if you need be. Again, motion detection events probably aren't going to work, but they are there. They will work from an on-vid perspective. Let's see here. So a couple of more questions that have come through. Bruce, sounds like you're having some oversee issues. There could be a lot of specific things going on there. If you mean that these details here won't load, that could be a few specific things going on. Could be network related in terms of speeds. It could be firmware related. It could be the age of the NVR. Either way, if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to kind of maybe take a look at a few things and whatnot. Our tech support team should also be able to help as well. But definitely feel free to reach out to me, and we can chat some more about that if you want to, if need be. Howard, strobe light and audio alarm. Those are specific use cases. We do have contact closures and relays, as well as audio in and out on our 510 series and 710 series IP cameras. If you wanted to tie those in to the cameras, I doubt we would add that as a standalone feature in a camera, mainly because those are very, very niche type installations where they aren't always needed. We try to make sure that our cameras fit a global set of scenarios there. I see the example of when you would want those. So we have the relays and the contacts to kind of support that, but having that embedded inside of the cameras is a very, very specific use case. So it makes sense. So Kyle, we support standard motion detection, which is kind of the old school way of doing things. And depending on the series of the camera, we support smart motion on some of those as well. So our 710 series, being our highest in camera, supports intrusion detection and line crossing detection, where you can draw boxes, and if something crosses into that box at a certain size, I want to support that. If something crosses this line at a certain size, I want to capture that. So those are what we support at the highest level of Luma. As you go down in series, you start to lose access to some of those, and we make that clear in the spec of the camera from a motion detection standpoint. And then we also support just your standard motion detection based off a box and things like that. Vigilant adds in a much higher level of detection as well. So Jared, if you have a 310 series NVR, that should be ready to go for the plug-in free experience. If it's not working, please reach out to me or reach out to your sales rep or our support team to get that rolling. From my understanding, it should be ready to roll from that, but I could be wrong. So if it's still not working, please let me know. I can definitely check into that for you if need be. So Mark asked, from playback, we support from our scrub bar here our playback is in a 12-hour time format. Our cameras also support a 12-hour time format. If you need a 24-hour time format, we support that as well. But by default, we're on a 12-hour time format. When you're looking at playback settings, as you see here on my screen right now. And guys, I think that's we've been powering through a lot of this type of stuff. Howard, we may do a Vigilant specific webinar here soon. Thank you for the feedback. I always like to hear what kind of training you guys are looking for. So we'll put that on the radar as a potential to do in the future. Thanks for that.
You covered so much ground quickly. You got to the point. Thank you so much. Every single time I'm exposed to Luma, I'm like, it's fantastic, you know. And so thank you for reinvigorating, if you will, for especially some of the guys that have been on the fence, or like you mentioned earlier, guys with hybrid systems everywhere out there. So thank you. All of us at the Snap AV Locals, Volutone, Custom Plus, MRI, and AllNet, we thank you so much. Derek, awesome job. I'll see you back here, buddy, in a few more hours. That'll conclude it. Be safe out there, guys. Take care.